Welcome back. In the last couple of episodes, we talked about 3 healthcare imperatives: quality and safe care, timely care, and access to care. We also talked about clinical processes with more focus on underlying information assets that serve to enable us to deliver on those processes and in turn on those 3 healthcare imperatives. We talked about various data systems and devices. In this episode number 9, we're going to focus on how important it is to assure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all of those information assets. We introduced these 3 information assets several episodes ago when we talked about the CT scan image attack. In this episode, we're going to dig a little bit deeper. A critical takeaway is as follows. If you understand these basic but critical elements of confidentiality, integrity, and availability, then you'll be well on your way to understanding what it takes to build a comprehensive enterprise-wide cyber risk management program. As a quick reminder of where we are in our journey, please have a look at this slide. As I mentioned a moment ago, episode number 9, I plan to record a total of 30 episodes, but I may flex to delete, add, or change as we go along and based on feedback. And by the way, all of these episodes will be posted to this YouTube channel. If you've not already done so, you might want to subscribe so you're notified when we post new episodes or related materials. Secondarily, do please provide feedback. And then finally, if you have any friends or colleagues whom you believe may benefit from these materials, please share the YouTube channel and link with them. Recall that in our last episode, I spoke about 3 types of information assets commonly found in healthcare delivery organizations. Number 1, traditional IT assets. Number 2, Internet of Medical Things or biomedical assets. And number 3, Internet of Things as a category of assets. As a reminder, if you work anywhere in the healthcare ecosystem, you obviously are executing on business processes that have underlying information assets that enable those processes to be delivered. So while your information assets may not be the same as those found in a healthcare delivery organization, the principles that we're covering in this session and all of these sessions apply. Various data, systems, and devices need to be protected. In fact, if we look at the Hipaa security rule, specifically, it requires that covered entities and business associates, and I'll read here, ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all electronic protected health information that the covered entity or business associate creates, receives, maintains, or transmits. So in other words, to comply with Hipaa, you must ensure the confidentiality, integrity, and availability of all electronic protected health information. And I will go on to say, based on the OCR enforcement actions, it extends beyond just the data. It includes all of the systems and all the devices that create, receive, maintain, and transmit that electronic protected health information. So let's go on to explore a little bit further what we mean by assuring confidentiality, integrity, and availability. First, confidentiality. Think about it from a personal perspective. What if my personal information was accessed by someone who ought not have it? You'll often hear the phrase an impermissible disclosure. What are some examples? Well, let's suppose, as has happened, a large healthcare payer ends up sending out a mailing to its HIV patients announcing a new HIV formulary where in the window addressed to the recipient, it indicates that they are an HIV patient. That's not good. That's an impermissible disclosure. Think of another example. Suppose that the cancer registry is shared with the board of directors, and it happens to be in a regional hospital. The board of directors might include the local bank president. And let's suppose there's information in that cancer register about an individual who has just recently made an application for a home loan. And that turns out to influence the banker in terms of granting that loan or not. Not a good thing. Let's suppose I'm applying for a job and it is intimated to the potential employer that I've had a number of back surgeries, and they just don't want to have someone added to their insurance roster who's got a history of back trouble, an adverse employment decision. Those are the kinds of bad things that can happen in the event of an impermissible disclosure of PHI or a compromise of confidentiality. Moving on, think about integrity for a moment. Very early on in the episode on the CT scan image hack, we talked about how cancerous nodules could be either added or deleted from that scan image, resulting potentially in a misdiagnosis and all other sorts of bad things happening beyond that. That's a compromise of the integrity of that information. Another example would be, what if someone hacked into the EHR system and modified my blood type the night before I was due to go in to have surgery, and let's say during that surgery I required a blood transfusion and was administered the wrong blood type. Not a good thing. Let's suppose someone hacks into a wireless IV infusion pump and dials up the morphine dosage for somebody who's in post-surgery recovery. And last but not least, spoiler alert, in case you're 10 years behind watching the episodes of Homeland, they did indeed kill the vice president by dialing up the pace on his implanted pacemaker. So that's an example of a compromise of integrity. And last but certainly not least, and probably the threat du jour, unless you've been on an interplanetary space mission for the last 10 years, you've probably heard of ransomware. That is the modern day way in which the availability of critical data systems and devices can be compromised. We have a very recent case. We talked about it in an earlier episode. Spring Hill Medical Center is now facing a lawsuit involving a quote-unquote bad baby case where systems were down due to a ransomware attack. Critical fetal monitoring devices were not available, etc., etc. That's a compromise of availability. And by the way, even though there's intense focus right now on ransomware as a way to compromise availability, there are lots of other ways in which that can happen, including, among others, a so-called distributed denial of service attack. So in summary, the punchline, the obligation required in Hipaa, and if you throw Hipaa out the window for a moment, just required in general. The basis of your cyber risk management program is to avoid the compromise of the CIA triad. So a final point I want to underscore as it relates to confidentiality, integrity, and availability. Even though we are dealing with information assets, even though we are dealing with data and systems and devices, this is not an IT problem. Just check out the headline on this slide. It's about patient safety, it's about quality of care, it's about patient satisfaction issues. And what's enumerated here under each of the respective columns are the kinds of bad things that can happen if there's a compromise of confidentiality, integrity, or availability. Take a look at this list. I'm not going to read it. Lots of bad things have happened, do happen, and will continue to happen when there are compromises. So just keep in mind, as the takeaway line on this slide indicates, it's critically important that we assure confidentiality, integrity, and availability. So what we covered in this episode was the concept of assurance, and we discussed three elements: confidentiality, integrity, and availability. As always, I'm ending the session with suggested actions as well as references and resources. And I would encourage you, while the material is still fresh in your mind, to consider some of the actions and consider consulting with some of the references and resources that are provided. So in the next episode, I'm going to cover the concept of connecting the dots. And we'll be connecting the dots between healthcare imperatives, quality and safe care, timely care, access to care, with the notion we talked about today, confidentiality, integrity, and availability, and finally, as those relate to the data and systems devices that we use to deliver healthcare. Until then, be sure to subscribe to the YouTube channel. Be well, be secure, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you.